now listening to the Film Monsters Podcast with Nate and Ray.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Film Monsters Podcast. I'm Nate.
And I am Groovy Ray.
Groovy. And it's been a while. It's been a couple weeks. Ray and I had life happen. Life got crazy for a little while.
But life found a way.
Yes, life. Thanks, Jeff. But we are back, and we know that when we got done with our interview with Mercedes, that we mentioned that we were going to do an episode on international films, and we are still planning on doing that episode. But Ray and I got very excited because we both saw a little film called Evil Dead Rise. And we figured because we saw the film Evil Dead Rise, this is a perfect excuse for us to talk about one of our favorite horror franchises ever, the Evil Dead franchise.
Yay! And since we have a lot of thoughts and feelings about this franchise, we're going to skip over all of our general minutia and just get right on it because
it'll take us forever. So I think the best way to start is with Sam Raimi's classic, The Evil Dead. And I don't know about you, Ray, but the first time I watched this movie, I was like 13 or 14 years old. And I just remember being completely enamored with what I was watching. Like, just everything between the practical effects, the pacing of the movie, the cinematography. I'd seen horror films, but I'd never seen a horror film like this.
Well, the thing about this movie, too, is that, like, I've never seen this, but it was basically a remake of his original short film, Within the Woods,
which I have also never seen.
He did this like 20-minute, basically it's Evil Dead, but like in a 20-minute format called Within the Woods. And that was the first project him and Bruce did. And they wanted to expand on that. And then they created Evil Dead on like still a shoestring budget. I mean, the movie is super low budget. It is so low budget.
Even the original Evil Dead is super low budget. I think I was looking the other day because I was looking at horror movie budgets, and I'm pretty sure the first Evil Dead was like, I think if even like adjusted for inflation, it was like $375,000 or something. Very low budget for a movie of that capacity. But I got lucky enough a couple of years ago, COVID times, Bruce Campbell did this like live Q&A while people watched Evil Dead 2. And what was really cool was he talked a lot about Evil Dead 2, but he talked a lot about coming up with the concept of the Evil Dead anyway. And the Evil Dead really is just a group of friends who wanted to make a movie. That's it. It's not like they went to a big studio. They weren't like trying to do something huge. They're just like, we want to make a movie, so let's make a movie.
Yeah, and the thing is that what I love, and I think what a lot of people love about the Evil Dead franchise, especially this first one, is they didn't let anything stop them. They wanted to create all these like different things, and because of the lack of budget, and not only the lack of budget, but the lack of knowledge on how to do things, that scene that has become so iconic now in the franchise where you see like the POV shot of the thing coming at them. I was listening to a podcast with Bruce where they talk about how they didn't know how to make that happen. So that's literally Sam Raimi hooked up the camera to some bike handles, and he's like running around with the bike handles and the camera, and he's screaming. He's doing like a scream, and then he took the scream and he like lowered the pitch and put like a slow-mo effect to it, and that's Sam Raimi screaming, running around with a camera in the woods.
Well, I mean, a lot of the things they did on the original Evil Dead, they could never get away with now because, like, one of the things Bruce Campbell was talking about was in the original Evil Dead, they were using live rounds in the firearms in a lot of the scenes, which no production company ever now would let you use live rounds in a firearm. And then, like, the scene you're talking about, Ray, where like the thing comes in and he's got the bike handles. There were scenes where like the famous scene where it first crashes into the window, essentially Sam Raimi looked at the actors and said, when it comes at you, move. Like literally looking at these actors and saying, no, we don't have stand-ins for you or anything. We're going to hook a camera up to a log and we're going to throw it through the window, and just told him to move out of the way. And it's like, it's the perfect example of like, and I'm sure they look back now and they're like, we're idiot kids, but Sam Raimi would have never had the career he has if he wouldn't have made that movie. And that's the thing. Sometimes as a filmmaker, you have to take risks to accomplish what you want.
I think this happened on Dead by Dawn, so we'll get there when we get there. But Bruce would tell stories of like, he would have chunks of blood like up his nose that he would be taking out at the end of every shooting, because it was just so the sheer amount of blood that they use. One of my favorite tidbits, you know that infamous scene where the guy gets stabbed in like the leg with the pencil?
Yes, one of my favorite scenes in that movie.
So when he does the stabbing, I guess I was reading somewhere that the sound effect is like somebody took a bite out of an apple. And that is the sound effect that they use for when the bone gets cracked, when the pencil goes in.
That scene still to this day, and I know that it's like technically like, you know, lower budget, but I still think when I watch the movie, that scene holds up. Like as cheesy as some of the effects look, it still kind of like makes me cringe when I see it happen. It's like something about like, I've twisted my ankle before and I've had things like that happen, and the thought of having like a pencil shoved into your leg is like horrifying.
Right. And then, you know, just all the little things that they did, like the stop motion of the body like melting.
Yes, and the things that make the film so charming. And I know that like this was kind of a troubled production. I know that like from what I've read in the past, there was a lot of arguments that happened on the set between Sam Raimi and because I mean, this was a group of friends, and like you think like even if you made something like this with your friends, there's bound to be crap that comes up because you're going to have creative differences, right? Like people are going to say that doesn't work or this does work. But it's crazy to me that this came out of all of that, because it is one of the most iconic films ever made. And I did want to talk about this because I always find it interesting about this movie with the time period that we live in. The tree scene has kind of been reevaluated over the years. And I know Sam Raimi has talked about it and said kind of like, if I looked back now on it as to how society looks at certain things, I probably wouldn't do it. But to me as a kid, that is like the ultimate form of evil, in my opinion, when you strip someone completely of their humanity. And when I was younger, that to me, when she was possessed in the tree as essentially assaulting her, that was one of the most horrifying things in the world to me as a kid. Like when I watched that scene, I would hide behind my hands most of the time because of how much it scared me.
Well, and I think, and this is like a trope that we see throughout all of the franchise, and this is something that makes Evil Dead, because we have so many possession movies. There's so many movies about demons and possessions, but I think what makes Evil Dead as a franchise stand out from like the average possession franchise is that evil, and kind of the motif going on is that evil has no regard or respect, and nothing is sacred, and it's the total loss of autonomy, the total loss of your body isn't safe from anything. So they will, you know, you have several scenes where they, you know, they will urinate on themselves, or you know, they will do things that, because that's, and to be quite honest, every time I see like those, you know, paranormal movies about like demon possession, I always find them kind of cheesy, because, you know, they paint these people like these supernatural forces. But like to me, a demonic possession, if you believe in that sort of thing, it's like you lose all autonomy from your body. Your body is no longer respected, and there's nothing more disrespectful to your body than being assaulted like that.
Oh, 100%, being completely stripped of your humanity. But one of the things I like about this movie, and I know that like in regular demon possession movies this happens, but what I love, and it also brings some of the comedy into it, which is disturbing when you think about, is how they use elements of the person's personality to manipulate other people, which to me is the most horrifying thing. Because like there's a lot of people when they watch these movies, and we'll talk about it through the whole franchise, that it's like, oh, it's stupid that you would fall for that, or oh, it's dumb that like when the demon's talking to you that you would like get closer to them or whatever. But like you have to understand, these people were in this place and very quickly their loved ones, their girlfriend, their brother, their sister have been turned into this malevolent entity, right? If they turn on a dime and their face goes normal again, you love that person. It's going to be really hard for you to kind of separate yourself. And I remember watching this the first time, and yes, it's these dumb teenagers going to a cabin in the middle of the woods, but they're close, they're friends, they care about each other. And you can tell when they start getting possessed just how much it is tearing up them inside to have to do these killings and to fight off these demons, because I think they all know somewhere deep in there that person is still there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, then there's that's the other thing we forget about too, because we look at it through this like modern lens. But this was like what, 1980, 81.
Mm-hmm.
There was no Instagram. There was no, social media. There was no cell phones. So like, the knowledge that we have of the world now was not as vast as they did back then. So I feel like a lot of people need to realize that a lot of these old school horror movies, like, it's not that far fetched. Like, if you see someone that, like you said, that you love and care for, suddenly is begging for your help, there's something that goes inside of you that tells you, that gives you hope. Maybe this will be all right, because we as humans want to be comforted.
100%. And that's one of the things that I'll be excited when we talk about the 2013 film and Rise, because of how different the filmmakers' approach are to that connection between those people and the relationship dynamics. But another thing I wanted to bring up too, and Sam Raimi does it so perfectly in this movie, is you watch a lot of possession films and most of them are like demonic possession, where it's just a weak-willed person is possessed by a demon or Satan or whatever, because they're broken down already. They've already been through a lot. And so they're a vessel that it's easy for a spirit to take over. What I like about the Evil Dead is the possession happens because of human curiosity, right? And throughout the years, humanity, because of our curiosity, has gotten us into a lot of really shitty situations. And I know that a lot of people are like, it's stupid, it's a book, what are you reading this for? Why are you doing this? Because we as a species are so curious about wanting knowledge. We want to gain knowledge, right? So if you see this giant book that's bound in human skin, it's going to be hard for you not to want to open it and look at it, right? Like, that's at least in my opinion. Right. So I always found that so fascinating that he took another route and kind of approached it as like, yeah, these idiot kids read out of this book, but how many people out there wouldn't?
Right. Well, especially because it's such a novelty thing. I mean, again, we'll kind of discuss this because he did something a little different. They did something a little interesting on Rice. Mm-hmm. When it came to the book, that I thought was really interesting. We'll talk about that. But yeah, on this one, it's what I thought it was also kind of endearing about this movie is that it's a very straightforward movie. It's mm-hmm. not trying to be anything more than what it is. It's just trying to survive the night. And obviously there's this demonic forces that get woken. I also love how they've kind of upgraded the tech. So like you have a reel-to-reel tape in this one.
Yes.
And I think in Dead by Dawn as well is a reel-to-reel, but
it is. They both are. But yeah, like, now we're getting records.
Yeah.
And you're getting 3 records. No, but my thing too about the original Evil Dead is we didn't know Bruce Campbell was going to be who he was at that point. In the 80s, you didn't know who the hero was going to be, which, like, obviously, people our age, Evil Dead was before our time. So we kind of knew going into it that Bruce Campbell was going to be who he was later on in the series. But I think it would have been really interesting in 1981 to go to the theater and be like, who's going to survive? Who's going to make it? Because you wouldn't really have any idea, especially the poster, because the poster doesn't really give anything away.
Especially because Bruce Campbell is, we know him as like groovy Bruce Campbell, but in the first Evil Dead, he is kind of the coward.
He's the straight man too. He just plays it. There's not even really like a quirkiness in his role. He's very just like the rest of them, right? Towards the end, he gets that like machismo attitude where he's fighting them off. But at first, when he's fighting them, he's like cowering back and he's like scared to fight, especially when he has to go up against his girlfriend.
Yeah. So I do think that was a really interesting take that, and I would even argue that Bruce Campbell was never even meant to be the hero. He was just the last one to survive.
But yeah, I agree with you. I think like, not knowing that Bruce Campbell was the one who was going to survive, because I mean, similar to Ridley Scott's Alien, right? No one knew Ripley was going to be the hero. When you watch Alien, you don't know Sigourney Weaver is going to be the one who survives at the end. You have no idea, because at the time Sigourney Weaver was no one. So at the same time, Bruce Campbell wasn't really anyone at this time period.
Well, like, just on a side note, Alien did this beautifully. You think the captain is the hero, and then halfway through the movie, he gets killed, and they pull the rug from under you.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing I love about this style of movie. And it's a tight 85 minutes. This movie is like an hour and 25 minutes long, and it does not waste a single second. The pacing in this movie is brilliant. Like from start to finish, I'm never bored. I'm always on the edge of my seat. And I feel like every time I revisit this, I'm like, am I going to like it less than the last time I watched it? And I always end up liking it more. I find something to appreciate about it, whether that be the practical effects, because I still think as practical as the things are, the Deadites in this movie scare the shit out of me.
Yeah, no, they do a really good job. And also they use a lot, like, I know it gets really violent once the action starts, it gets really violent, but they did a really good job at setting the mood, even from like the very beginning where you have that awesome scene of like the chair just like swinging, and right when they pull up it stops, and just subtleties like that that starts building the tension from the like they almost get in a car accident like first the first 5 minutes of the movie. So like they do a bunch of subtleties throughout the movie that just kind of make, they kind of hint at like the bridge being unstable. Like there's all these like little nuances that they put throughout, like this breadcrumb of like crap is gonna hit the fan and it's gonna be ugly.
Oh, 100%. And that's what I love so much about it, is like for being released in an era of movies like horror in this time period, you were either getting a slasher or a ghost story or something, but like you kind of had an idea of what you were getting into when you got into something, right? This movie is so different because when you get into it, you think you kind of know how it's going to play out, but Sam Raimi is such an incredible director that he throws so many things at you that I don't think you'd know to expect. And I also feel like, this isn't a jump scare laden horror movie. It's a lot about what you see and the manipulations. Like the girl singing the nursery rhyme still to this day haunts me, because like taking something so childlike and innocent and making it really evil, it's so unsettling.
Well, then you have something that I really appreciate about this Evil Dead 2 is I think this movie was supposed to be an NC-17, wasn't it?
It was supposed to, I believe you are correct. It was supposed to be NC-17 because of the gore. But I know that I think it was banned theatrically in some countries.
And
like I think there were some places that didn't allow it to be screened.
And was it this one that Stephen King pushed?
Yes, 100% he did. Yeah, Stephen King was on board with this. Stephen King has always been really on board with Sam Raimi throughout his career. But what I do want to talk about too, while we're on this one, and I know we're going to move to Evil Dead 2 soon, but the partnership between Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell is so important, because this is really a brainchild of two people. This is like a collaborative effort. And this thing that we know and love would not exist without the two of them. And I think like this as a framework film is just so impressive, just in every regard. And it's so funny, like even watching it, when I rewatched it not too long ago, I actually watched an old DVD copy because it was before I got my 4K Blu-ray remaster, and just seeing like the shots of the moon at night where you can see almost like it's a matted painting over top of like just DIY shit that they were doing their best to try to make it look as good as they possibly can. And I personally, for 1981, I think this movie holds up. I don't think that it's lost a lot of its flair.
No, not at all. And I think we keep saying this, but we'll talk about this more in detail later. But I think what these reboots like 2013 and Rise have done, that they have done right, is that they have kept Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi in the driver's seat in one way or another. And that is what makes those movies work, I feel.
Exactly. It's the same thing. And I know you're not as familiarized with it, Ray, but it's why I love the Child's Play franchise so much. Because over the years, even if he hasn't directed them, Don Mancini has always written or been a producer. So that series has always stayed consistent and true to what it is. Because when you have the people who were originally involved, they're not going to let it fall apart. And I think Bruce Campbell, like, obviously, you know, people asked him for years, are you going to come back? We got the Ash versus the Evil Dead TV series, but he's getting older now. He doesn't want to move around and do all that stuff the way that he used to. But I think that it goes to show how much he loves the material, that he's willing to put his own money into it and take the time and effort to make sure that the fans aren't disappointed.
Yeah, he definitely does great, and that's why the follow-up to Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn,
My favorite
was
movie of all time. One of my favorite movies of all time. Yeah,
same.
get ready for a 5-hour episode on Evil Dead 2.
We honestly, if I were to do like a top 5 movies of all time, this one would be there too for me as well.
It's everything I love about movies. I think because and I want to ask your opinion on this because you love it so much, but everybody calls this a comedy. And yes, there is a lot of comedic elements in this movie, but there are moments in this movie that I find genuinely horrifying. And I think the psychology of this movie is one of the scariest in the whole franchise.
I think this movie is a comedy the way that when you are so tense and so like you've seen that, like you've seen it in theaters, you see people reactions in theaters, like when you get a jump scare and people like get scared and then they just laugh it off.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's the perfect way how this movie is a comedy. This movie is a comedy in the way where you're so uncomfortable that all you can't help but just laugh, mostly to calm yourself down because you're
Mm-hmm.
so uncomfortable.
Exactly. And I think it's perfectly summed up by that scene with Bruce Campbell in the living room where all the furniture is laughing. And that, to me, if I was making like a top 10 scenes in a film of all time, that would be really high up there because I think that it conveys the mood of the movie perfectly. You have this person who's technically already gone through this scenario, or so we think, and he's living through this again, but this time he doesn't have his friends. He doesn't have anyone else. He's alone by himself, being haunted by this evil, malevolent spirit. And he's lost his mind so much that he's just laughing hysterically with the entity. He's just gone so nuts that he just loses his mind. And the first time I watched it, I laughed, but I was also so uncomfortable because I was like, what's going to happen to him next?
There's this scene in the mirror that I always laugh when I see it, but then I laugh like almost because I'm uncomfortable, where he was like, "You're okay, you're fine." And then he pops out he pops out of the mirror and he's like, "We just cut up our girlfriend with a chainsaw." Does that seem fine to you? Like it just makes you like, yeah, it's like you laugh about it, but you're like, "Oh no, like they did that."
So fun fact that you're going to love about this. Wes Craven and Sam Raimi had kind of a budding relationship at this time where they kind of poked fun at each other a lot in their movies. So if you watch the first Evil Dead movie, Sam Raimi intentionally put a Last House on the Left poster on the wall, ripped in half, essentially saying like, hey, this is this dumb horror movie. My movie's better than yours. And
that's hilarious.
Wes Craven thought that was hilarious when he did that. I'm sorry, not The Hills Have Eyes. That's what it was. The Hills Have Eyes. Wes Craven's original Hills Have Eyes. So he put that on the wall. So in Evil Dead 2, when you watch Evil Dead 2, there's a Freddy Krueger glove in the shed when he goes out to get the chainsaw. And when you watch Nightmare on Elm Street, Nancy is watching Evil Dead on the TV. So throughout their whole career, they loved each other so much, they just put each other's work in each other's movies, which
that's awesome.
You all out there know I love Wes Craven. So it really it's cool to see that kind of stuff. But no, Evil Dead 2, I watched this Q&A with Bruce Campbell where he gave away so much about how they filmed the movie. And you'll think this is really interesting, Ray. When they shot Evil Dead 2, they had a cabin in the middle of Tennessee somewhere that they shot a lot of the exteriors at, but the interiors were shot at an old high school. They literally, yes, they hollowed out an old high school and they built all the sets inside of it. And Bruce Campbell said there was no air conditioning in there. at all. So when you see him just covered in sweat and just like disgusting, that's because of how hot it was in there. And Ted Raimi plays the Deadite
Henrietta. Yeah,
Henrietta.
Henrietta.
When they put him in there were multiple times he almost passed out of exhaustion because of how hot it was.
Well, and I heard a story that I forget his name, the redneck dude with Bobby Jones.
Yes, I know who you're talking about. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, I heard that he got legitimately upset because they almost drowned him in blood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh, there's so many things. My favorite scene is, you know, the great scene in Evil Dead 2 where Bruce Campbell is flying through the air when he's getting pushed by the spirit and he's flipping. He was on a rig. Like that, they literally put him on and they would spin him in circles and stuff to get the shot. And Bruce was like, Sam kept me up there for like 6 hours. And he's like, I know he was just fucking with me at this point where he's just spinning over and over. But like, how else would you achieve that practical effect at that period in time? There's no other way. It's essentially just putting him up there, spinning it normal, and then speeding up the frame rate when you cut together the film, which is fascinating. But like hearing those behind the scenes stories, they had a higher budget with this movie. There was more things that they could do. Obviously, they got Joseph DeLuca to do the score, which the score to Evil Dead 2 is phenomenal. I love it. But yeah, this movie, there's a lot of funny moments in it, and there's a lot of really horrifying moments. But I think this movie is Bruce Campbell. The bodily performance that Bruce Campbell gives in this is like God tier. That scene where he's in the kitchen and he's knocking all the plates over because his hand's possessed. He did all that shit. And that's like doing the front flips and stuff. Like, how do you even pull something like that off? It's so impressive.
Well, and I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard that the reason why they basically did like a recap of Evil Dead 1 is because they went with a different studio and they couldn't get the rights.
Yep.
So basically Evil Dead 2, the first like 20-30 minutes is just like a retelling of the first Evil Dead, but it's just him and Linda, and then they added all the other characters. So, and I hear that was the thing also with Army of Darkness, where they couldn't get the rights, so they had to reshoot the intro.
Well, what I really love about that too is the way they have Bruce Campbell play that performance is like, wait a minute, have I done this before? Like they it's like almost a nod as like a, hey, you're living this same experience that you lived prior. And there's so many moments in this I love. I know a lot of people give it shit. I love the dancing skeleton moment. I think it's wonderful. It makes me laugh every time I see it. And just like going out there with just your girlfriend and having to murder her in the first 15 minutes of the movie.
Also, I love how this one started like injecting the comedy. Like they make, you know, Bruce Campbell more of like he's trying to be suave type of guy. He's like, what do you say, baby? Like he starts doing the baby thing.
He's an absolute badass in this movie too. Like I love all the action scenes in this movie. They're shot in such a creative way. And I also love like the space, like the enormity of the space, because it seems like a really small cabin, but with cinematography they make it seem pretty big. Like I always think of the scene with the entity coming through the house and going through all the different rooms and going out through the back, and then you think about how big the basement is when they're down there doing the stuff with Henrietta in the basement. Like it's such an eerie place. Like just thinking about it is so horrifying. And I love that, like you said, they bring in other characters towards the end, but the first 40 minutes of this movie is the Bruce Campbell show.
Yeah, it's just Bruce Campbell. And what I love about this movie so much, as far as, you know, all of that goes, is that this is when you finally, okay. So one of the things that I love about this movie, obviously because of the higher budget, the makeup I think still holds up.
100%.
When Bruce Campbell becomes possessed and his face gets all gross and his eyes are all like completely white, like that's still frightening to look at to this day.
Oh, 100% it is. That's like, there's something about the way the eyes look that freak me out from the original, like the glaze. And I don't know how they did contact stuff back then. I'm sure it was hard for the actors to even see what was going on. But it's also the weathering of the skin, right? And I think like when you're limited, and that's one of the things that like, we can talk about this a little bit, but like CGI now, one of the things is when you're really reliant on CGI and you know that you can do anything that you want, there's less creativeness when it comes to how something should look. And what I like about this is when you're a filmmaker and you're like, well, how do I make this look unique? I don't have computer effects. I don't have these things. I have to try and come up with something really different. And it almost like some of the makeup reminds me of Carnival of Souls a little bit.
Yeah.
Just in the face, which is cool, but obviously it's a little bit more weathered and beat up than in that movie. But yeah, there's something about it to this day when I watch it. I'm like, I wish some filmmakers now would kind of go that route and try to keep it more practical because they might make something genuinely horrifying.
Right. And I love that we still go back to the book. I feel like the book has such a like, obviously the book is in a way the thing that always sparks. I love how the book changes the way it looks throughout the movies.
100%. And it's so cool. And I love the lore. And we'll talk about it when Rise comes into it to the effect. But I like in Rise that they said there's like 3 volumes of the Necronomicon, and we're bringing in an entirely new lore into it, which is what's cool because like, yes, at the end of the day, it's a book bound in human flesh that makes spirits rise out of the ground. But because there's like a limited understanding as to what it is, you can kind of do whatever you want with it.
And I love that the book almost feels, not almost, it is its own character. So like as you see the book change in appearance, and you get the book looks a little more disgusting, or there's more artwork to it. Like I feel like every movie expands on what the book contains. That like sure. It feels like its own character.
You mean this?
Oh, the Necronomicon Ex Mortis. Oh, I guess is the Army of Darkness one.
Oh, isn't that awesome? Yeah, so it's completely detailed in every single page with the lore.
That's amazing.
Yeah, also I can show you my friend.
It's Henrietta. Oh,
yes, which is perfect for Evil Dead 2.
I didn't know you were bringing a guest.
Yes, this is my guest for it. No, Jess actually bought me this. I really love these horror companies that are making these like really accurate masks. I bought a Psycho Goreman one. I'm gonna have like a whole entire thing. But yeah, this Necronomicon, I just thought it was so cool that they did the detailed pages out with like all the drawings and the original like text in there. And I don't know how they came up with that because they didn't talk about it a lot in the thing that I watched, but it's like you were saying, it's so cool that the lore in it, your mind kind of goes all over the place. Like, where did they come up with this? Why did they write this book? Why did they like do it as a way to like, can we communicate with these spirits? And then it just kind of turned on them and it went the wrong way, which I think Rise did a nice job with those priests talking about that, which we'll get to when we talk about that movie.
Yeah, they did such a great job at just kind of taking that book and making it like this over. It's almost like a developing character.
Mm-hmm. Well, even in 2013, it's wrapped in trash bags with barbed wire around it. Like they really didn't want you to get to it. And Rise, obviously, it's buried underground. They're trying to make you not be able to get a hold of it. Where in like the Evil Dead, it's just like sitting on a table.
Just like very neatly. Well, but I do like that on Dead by Dawn, there is the whole thing about an archaeologist trying to decipher the book.
Yes, and if you ever get a chance to see Evil Dead the musical, you get even more insight into that, which I got to experience Evil Dead the musical this year for the first time ever. And they told us to buy ponchos, Jess and I to buy ponchos. They literally shoot so much fake blood from the stage that you are covered in like 2 inches of it by the time the show's over. And the songs are hilarious, and they combine Evil Dead 1 and 2. So you get both movies in one.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. But Evil Dead 2, like, I don't think you guys realize how much Ray and I love this movie. Like, there's so much. I could break this movie down from start to finish just because of how much I love it. I also love that the artwork is so pointless to the movie. I've always thought I'm like, what does the skull even mean? Why did you do this?
But it's such an iconic artwork, though.
It is, but it has, well, it's similar to like, I think of the Suspiria trailer that came out where there was like this woman who had like you just saw her hair from the back and they turned her around and her face was a skull. That's not in the movie at all. It's like there's a lot of marketing campaigns that are really interesting for movies, but I don't think Sam Raimi ever thought this was gonna be a franchise. I don't think that he was like, I'm just making movies because I like to make movies. But Evil Dead 2 to me is like the iconic horror film. When I think about what horror movie do I want to rewatch, Evil Dead 2 is like the first thing that always comes to mind. I'm like, I want to watch this because I'm gonna have fun with it. It's gonna scare me. It's gonna be violent. Like it's gonna be everything I want.
So I wanted to ask you, what is your take on the big reveal of the thing chasing them?
What, in Evil Dead 2?
Mm-hmm.
Which big thing? Oh, are you talking about Henrietta?
No, the big like monster that's chasing them.
Oh,
the big reveal.
I love it so much. I personally love it. I think that it's great. I love how completely dumb the third act of this movie is. Like, obviously we know what we get with Army of Darkness, but I just try to put myself in Sam Raimi's head as to like what the hell was going on in your mind with these trees, and then like being sucked into this portal at the end of the movie. Like, what, I'm curious as to where his mind was at when he was coming up with all these ideas.
I love how like he's looking at a bunch of faces
Mm-hmm.
and like they pop out like on the side, like we'll swallow your soul.
It's
Which-
and that's it's so good.
Which, here's something really interesting about this movie that was so effective to me. So Evil Dead and Dead by Dawn, I saw them when I was older, as in like 12 or 13. But Army of Darkness, I saw when I was a little kid. Like I was
Mhm.
literally like 8 or 9 when I saw Army of Darkness. And I remember on Army of Darkness, I had no idea Army of Darkness was the third installment on the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like so intrigued, like how did he lose his arm? And I found some sound clips on like, I don't know what it was. I think it was like I forget what it was, but I found some sound clips on the internet once, and it was a sound clip of him like screaming, "Give me back my hand." And I was like, what in the world is this? And then I quickly put together, I'm like, oh, there's another movie. So that scene where he cuts his hand off, it's just so brutal.
It is. And then how goofy, like Addams Family-esque it gets with the hand. I love it. But that's, like I said, the bodily performance with Bruce Campbell, where he's like moving his hand all over the place and he's like grabbing it and it's like going like this. And I'm like, that takes a really dedicated performer to be able to pull all that off. And like, I'd be curious. He talked a little bit about it, but I'm not sure how they did all the gags with the hand moving around. But it still looks really good, even for the 80s.
Which, by the way, did you see Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness?
No, I still haven't seen it.
Oh, there's a scene, Bruce Campbell has a cameo in it,
Mhm.
and he starts hitting himself because Doctor Strange gives him gives him a little curse to hit himself, and he does the hand thing like as he's hitting himself.
Oh my God. That is absolutely amazing. No, I love this movie a lot. I think that where it goes, it's very interesting. I don't know if you know this, but originally Sam Raimi wanted to call Army of Darkness The Medieval Dead. That was the title that he wanted it to be. But I do find it interesting, and we'll transition to Army of Darkness here in a second. But I do find it interesting that like I don't know, they chose to like tame it a lot. Like there's nothing about Army of Darkness that scares me at all. It's like
No,
it's
Army
more
of
of a
Darkness,
goofy
it's a comedy.
adventure. It's a goofy adventure movie more than anything else.
Yeah.
And I do know that like when Sam Raimi went to them, he said similarly to what you were talking about when you watched it the first time. He was like, how are people going to know that this is attached to my other franchise? There's nothing about it unless you put in the tagline that it's a sequel to Evil Dead 2. No one's going to know what it is. And I know Army of Darkness was a critical failure at the theater. I know that it did not do very well and didn't make a lot of money. But I am interested, like if Sam Raimi was like, I want to play a little bit more into the comedy aspect and kind of dive into it. Or if the production company was like, we're going to limit how much gore you can put in this movie. Because I think it has an R rating for Army of Darkness, and I have no idea why.
No, I don't know either. I think the R rating may just come from like, is there more than 2 F words in it?
No, I don't even know if there's one. Oh, you know what it is? It's the Fountain of Blood.
That, and you get to see some side boob.
Yeah, that's probably it. But yeah, I think it's interesting. And I don't know if you have any more to say about Evil Dead 2 other than it's a masterpiece.
Well, again, we run into the same issue, and here's how we can transition into Army of Darkness. But we run into the same issue that Evil Dead ends in one way, and Army of Darkness starts in a vastly different way. Like at the end of Evil Dead, he shoots the gargoyle down and everybody's celebrating. But at the beginning of Army of Darkness, they think he's some sort of like, they somehow think he's, even though he fell from the sky, they think
Hail
he's
he who comes from the sky.
I personally love Army of Darkness. I have such a like fond memories with that movie, and I just love that movie so much. But yeah, this movie is just like, it went off the rails as far as like, this is just a comedy.
Yeah. Did you notice that what's his name? Is it at the beginning of the movie? Henry the Red. Did you notice that all of his minions have red hair? Every single one of them. Like that's just that's a stupid Sam Raimi thing. Yeah, I would say, and we're gonna do the rank list at the end of the video, but like this is my least favorite. As much as I love it, there are moments in it where I'm like, come on, like the thing with the mini ashes. I just like every time I watch it.
I love it so much.
It's dumb fun, but the compositing in it is so bad. Like even watching like remastered editions of it now, it still looks terrible. And I feel like pacing wise, it's definitely the worst paced of the three of them. There's a lot of moments I'm like, all right, get it together. But I think the reason why I don't like this one as much is because it completely got rid of the horror elements. Like it's really not a horror movie. It feels much more of like an adventure flick. And there are moments about it that I really love. I still have a lot of fun with it. I have 2 Army of Darkness t-shirts. Like I still really enjoy this one, but it's definitely the one I revisit the least.
See, and for me, like, well, it goes to show, I watched it when I was 8 years old, and it didn't really do much for me as far as scare goes. I just thought it was a really fun movie.
And it is fun.
I just think My Fair Lady, ha!
And once again, like we talked about it with Evil Dead 2, but this movie wouldn't work without Bruce Campbell.
No, this movie needs, and I think what I love about this movie, for me personally, is the most quotable one.
It is very quotable.
That's where you get the Hail to the King, baby. That's where you get the Come Get Some. That's where you get the, I know, but 2 things right now. Jack and shit, and Jack left town.
Yes. That is hilarious. Yeah, there are moments in this I really like. I really like the evil version of, I guess it's like an evil version of Ash again, like from the second movie.
He's bad Ash. He's bad
yes.
Ash. He's good Ash and bad Ash.
I like that element of the movie. I think some of the battle sequences are really good in it. But like for me, this almost feels like a studio went to Sam Raimi and was like, hey, you can't be as gory or violent as you were before. Because if this movie was like way more gory than it is, I think I would like it even more. But if it's like I said, this movie probably could be PG, realistically speaking.
No, there's maybe not PG-13 because I think PG-13 would be a fair one.
It doesn't have that like intense impact of the first 2 Evil Deads, where it's like this movie makes me laugh a lot, and obviously that's due to Bruce Campbell. But like whenever it ends, I'm like, I just want to go back and watch Evil Dead 2 again, or I want to watch Ash versus the Evil Dead, the TV series.
I felt like Ash vs. Evil Dead mixed the horror and the comedy the best. If you want to go for comedy.
Oh, for sure. Did you know about the original ending to this movie too?
I love, the original ending is so funny.
Well, and the fact that the studio was like, oh, it's gonna be too depressing. You need to make it more optimistic.
The only good thing that came out of that was the Hail to the King part.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Like, I wonder, I'd like to read more up about like what Sam Raimi went through to kind of get this made, and like if he's thrilled with the way it turned out or how he feels about it.
I will admit it would have been a lot harder to make Ash vs. Evil Dead without that ending, because the original ending, there is like, it's not depressing. It's just kind of like, what do you do? He's stuck in this wasteland. But with the ending that we get, there's more to the story. And then we can add on, Ash vs. Evil Dead, which basically picks up, obviously like 30 years later, but it picks up that storyline.
Right at S-Mart. Yeah, but I think it's funny too, because the Evil Dead 2 and this one were produced by Dino De Laurentiis, who produced almost every David Lynch movie, which is really funny. Dino is like as far as producers goes, he was one of the guys that like financed some of my favorite movies of that era, because he was like, let the weirdos make the movies they want to make, which is something I really respect. And yeah, Sam Raimi, like, one of the things I can say, because obviously when we move on to talking about 2013, we'll be kind of getting out of the Sam Raimi talk. But like, Sam Raimi is one of those lovable weirdos that I just respect so much. That's like, I'm going to make this franchise that should have never been a franchise that works really well as a 3-part piece. And I think I always love watching them back to back to back. I don't know if you try to do that, Ray, but typically when I revisit them, I try to, even if I can't do them all on the same day, I really like to watch the first 3 back to back to back, because I just think it's so much fun.
No, I've tried a couple times. I think I've done it a couple times, but not often.
Yeah, it's always fun just to kind of see how the movies progressed, or to some people's sake regress, after Evil Dead 2. But it's like I said, I don't want you guys to feel like I'm shitting on Army of Darkness, because I think it's a fun movie and I have a lot of fun with it. And I think that like that battle sequence in the 3rd act is always like a blast to watch. I always laugh so hard at it. And it's yeah.
I quote it all the time with my family. I'm always like, welcome back to the land of the living.
Yes, it's a very, very, very quotable movie. And like, it's Ash is unhinged. He's giving like his most like macho performance, where he's just like, I'm the ladies' man, and I'm gonna, and it's Bruce Campbell having the time of his life, which you can't really get upset about that, because Bruce Campbell's the man.
Right. And maybe before we segue into 2013, maybe let's just plug just real quick Ash vs. Evil Dead, because I think it's worth mentioning.
I mean, it's amazing. Honestly, like, if you're an Evil Dead fan, I would say, and I won't add that in when we rank it,
No, me neither.
because you have a longer form amount of time to tell a story when you're doing it as a TV series. But like, it totally aligns with Evil Dead 2, probably the best of any of the stuff made. And
Yeah.
Bruce Campbell acted like he never left. I mean, his performance is just as good.
And what I loved about Ash vs. Evil Dead is that they did something that was really, and I think this is the first time they added some layers of because the first 3 movies, as amazing as they are, they're very like straightforward, like, we're going to go into this cabin and kill a bunch of people and call it good. But this one started building relationships. You get that relationship he gets with Dana De Lorenzo and I forget the name of the other guy.
Ray Santiago. Yeah, they're both amazing actors. They do an amazing job.
And then you have like, eventually down the road in the movie, you get the kind, the Lucy Lawless arc. That you also get the you meet his dad. You see him haunted by like, the fact that he killed his sister in the woods, at least the townspeople. So you get all of these layers of like, what I loved about it is you get to see the actual fallout of what would happen to someone that went through such traumatic experience.
And I would also argue some of the darkest comedy of Evil Dead period. That scene where all them people get wiped out in that restaurant, and then like Ash is I'm like, and they're telling jokes about that kid swinging from the ceiling fan. And I'm like, this is getting like dark. But that's how you knew that Sam Raimi had something to do with it. Because like, it's pitch perfect. And also an early cameo from none other than Samara Weaving in the first season.
Yeah, that's right.
Which she was awesome. And I love like the changing in the settings, right? Because you have all those things. I can't remember which season it was, but the stuff at the military base was awesome. And just like changing the settings, putting Evil Dead in a different environment, still having that goofy, over-the-top nature, sticking with practical effects, right? Because that's one of the things they didn't take away from. They're like, yes, this is a modern show, but we're going to hang on to the practical effects. And that's what kept the charm. I think that if more directors worked today and said, hey, let's go back to the era of practical effects. Let's kind of pull off, like, you could use CGI, but like, I think of something like Psycho Goreman, right? Where you mix CGI with practical effects and it's really charming. It has a feel that not a lot of other movies have. Or like Turbo Kid. Turbo Kid is another perfect example where you have CGI, but you also have really amazing practical effects. And I think if more directors did that, the horror community would be a happier bunch.
Oh, for sure. Well, and not only that, but like some of the kills on Ash vs. Evil Dead are like brutal. Like, I don't know. I don't know if you remember that brutal scene where they used the ham slicer.
Oh yeah. That was nuts. And I mean, you can tell that was a lot of the writing room was like, how are we going to make these wild kills? And they
And then
nail it.
like Bruce Campbell's character, Ash, he's so broken by his life that he just doesn't even like that part where he like makes the graves and puts the crosses.
She
And
was
then he's
Jewish.
like, she was Jewish. Like, I wish you would have said something before I built those dumb crosses.
It was so I like when I saw that the first time I laughed so hard, but also like I think of even the first episode of Ash versus Evil Dead when the cop was going through the pitch black house. That was horrifying. Like it didn't pull back on the horror either. And that's what I think, like if you're an Evil Dead fan and you've never watched Ash versus Evil Dead, you are missing out on some of the best parts of the lore of it. Because it's just truly like, it's also incredibly rewatchable. It takes a turn in the third season that gets pretty insane. The character arcs in the movie or in the show are fantastic. The performances are all amazing. I just truly like love it. I love the show. I think it is an absolute blast. It took so many turns. I love that they brought back the girlfriend.
Yes.
I thought that was, I never would have expected that. When they pulled that, when they went to that house in that episode and Ash is like, oh my God, she's here. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? But yeah, Ash vs. Evil Dead, it's a perfect TV show. I wish it would have gone on for 15 seasons.
Yeah. That was the problem with them putting it on Stars. No one gave a crap about Stars.
No, and I'm surprised it made it 3 seasons, but I think that like them putting it on Netflix helped a lot.
Yeah, it's just a bummer that he retired the character after that. But like I get it. He even said himself, like, I don't want to be bathing in blood every day. Which 2 little quick stories about Ash vs. Evil Dead. I think it was with Dana De Lorenzo. I was watching this interview and she was like, it was I every time they brought a new member of the cast, they had an initiation ritual which they would shoot them with the blood gun. And she was like, there was nothing more intimidating than shooting Lee Majors.
Can we also talk about like why is Dana De Lorenzo not in more stuff?
She is amazing.
She would be an incredible final girl in any sort of like slasher, or just put her in any horror movie. She's amazing. And Ray Santiago had a perfect like scared persona at the beginning, and then like his character was so lovable, and he's just such like all the performers they got in that show were amazing. Did you ever think you'd see Xena Warrior Princess in the Evil Dead TV show?
Well, I mean, Bruce Campbell was in Xena, so
I forgot that Bruce Campbell was in Xena. That's really cool. But yeah, I love it. I love Ash vs. Evil Dead.
The other tidbit that I just wanted to share before I move on is you watch the Creep Show TV show on Shudder, right?
Yes, I do.
Remember that episode when Sam Raimi shows up with the Necronomicon?
Yes. Which also, we're not talking about Creep Show right now, but watch Creep Show on Shudder because it's really good.
Yeah. So that's Ash vs. Evil Dead. I wish it stuck around, but I think even though it leaves on a cliffhanger, I do still think I got enough closure for me to be okay with that ending.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, because it's kind of like the drive off into the sunset kind of thing, right? I mean, like there's still things going on that they could build on, but it's not like, I mean, that world really is never ending, right? Like the evil threat is always going to keep posing itself.
Right.
They could have, I don't know. Whatever. I love it.
And then we all got nervous when they announced 2013 was going to bring us an Evil Dead. I was personally nervous.
So was I. I was horrified because I'm thinking like, and I know Ray and I talk about this on the podcast a lot, but I think part of it is when you love a franchise and you care about something so deeply, so many garbage remakes get put out. Like I think of like the Poltergeist remake a couple years ago, Nightmare on Elm Street remake, all these that are like put in the hands of these directors that have no idea what tonally it's supposed to feel like. And at that time, I don't think any of us knew much from Fede Alvarez at all.
I think this is his feature debut.
Yeah, so we didn't know anything what he was capable of. And I remember going to see this in the theater with my brother and leaving and just being like, that's exactly what I wanted in an Evil Dead remake.
Yeah, because it feels like a remake of the original one. So it has all the dread and gore. And I would argue that this one, 2013, is the most violent one out of them all.
I agree. I think that it's definitely more violent than Rise. I think Ash versus Evil Dead is probably the closest that comes to this
But
with the
Ash vs.
violence,
But Ash vs. Evil Dead is still comedic violence.
yeah,
This is just straight up like dread.
This is well, Rise, I might be able to argue a little bit because of what happens in it, but this is probably the darkest tonally of all the movies. Like the Deadites still have some humor in them, but like you're also dealing with the subject matter of drug addiction for our lead character, and so the movie is already very heavy as it is, because instead of teenage kids going out to party, it's teenage kids trying to help someone break a drug addiction.
Yeah, and this is, I feel like, the first time where they start adding some actual like emotional depth to the character. There's this like, because you have Mia who wants to break, like apparently she has had multiple tries where she has failed, and then you have the addition of her brother, who is an estranged member of the family basically, and they've all grown apart, and it's this reunion slash trying to help each other out. So there's it's not just as simple as saying like, we'll get out of there. No, there's actually something at stake here.
And Jane Levy's performance is awesome.
Jane Levy is also another like incredible final girl.
Who is not, I know she was in that TV show for a while that was like the musical TV show, but I feel like I haven't seen her in a lot of stuff recently.
Yeah, she did Don't Breathe after this, and then
Don't Breathe was fine. It was enjoyable. It wasn't like the best horror movie, but like her performance in this is fantastic. And I love that like they kind of hint towards the middle, you think the brother is going to be the new Bruce Campbell, and then they turn it on its head, and it is not the brother at all. It's all her show.
But I do love that they got away from Bruce Campbell as far as like the Ash character.
Oh, for sure.
It's and I think that was a smart thing, because you can't recreate Ash. You can't.
No, it'll never happen. And that's the thing. Like we talk about this all the time with remakes, is like, if you're going to remake something, which I have a hard time even calling this a remake. It's more of a reimagining, right? Because it's like, there are similarities to the original, but it's such a different thing.
I was watching an interview with Fetty because Shout Factory just did a 4K remaster of Evil Dead.
Yeah.
And it comes with Shout Factory does a really good job at adding a bunch of extras. And there was an interview with Fetty where he was like, I didn't want to remake the movie. He's like, what I wanted to do was basically, because the way that they explained it was that they feel like Evil Dead can be a franchise, but not like a part 1, part 2 franchise, but it could just be different stories all surrounding the Necronomicon. So they're like, for all intents and purpose, Evil Dead 2013 could very well just be another story that happened in the same world as Ash's world. It's just at a different point in time. So this is not meant to be a sequel or a reboot. It's just another story.
And the thing I love so much about this too is like the fact that the possession in this is such an allegory for addiction, right? Because Jane Levy's character is the one who survives, right? She makes it through to the end, but isn't it indicative of how addiction destroys families? Yeah. Because literally everyone in her life is dying. Everybody gets killed and obviously, someone's addiction doesn't necessarily kill someone, but like it pushes people away. It destroys lives of family members. It ruins relationships. And I love that is the central focus of that movie. It really makes the emotional impact so much more when it's like, okay, here's a theme for why this exists. Evil Dead 1 and Evil Dead 2, they're just fun movies. They're super entertaining. This movie has a lot of heart to it in a way that's very emotionally draining at moments when you're watching it, because you just feel so bad for all these people, because they're all just trying to do something good, right?
Right. Well, and then that is because we always talk about in movies like, why would you stay there? Why would you do this? But I feel like this one, they want to leave right away when she starts acting weird. But they're like, there's the drug addiction things. Like, she's done this before. She's freaked out before and harmed herself so she can get out of this. So we can't let her leave this time. So there's like this reason to stay, which that gives. And then, because of drug addiction, and people can react very intensely when they're trying to, to detox. They don't even think, oh, it's a possession. They're like, no, she's just freaking out because she's detoxing, and then obviously more happens.
And the look of the Deadites in this is phenomenal. I feel like if you're gonna add in more CGI effects and stuff, this is the way you want to do it because they look horrifying. Jane Levy's look especially is terrifying, and that scene where she splits her tongue in half is like stuck in my head for an eternity.
There is two great moments just from watching these interviews. That scene where Jane Levy's running and you have the crane shot following her. They said that they took so many shots of that, and that Jane Levy was just like, she was like, I was wet, I was cold. She was like, I was frustrated. She was like, I was mad. So she's like, that part when you see me crying and screaming, she was like, that was me crying and screaming because I was just so upset that we couldn't get the shot. That like, she was just so like, so she's actually like, that's actually her upset.
That's crazy.
And then there's that scene where she's possessed and she's at the bottom and she's kind of like trembling and shaking. I guess not Sam Raimi, I'm sorry, Fetty was shooting her for about like, there's like 5 to 10 minutes worth of her just kind of trembling and making faces and like, you know, just convulsing. And after like 5 or 10 minutes, she was like, can we stop? Like, I'm really disturbed.
Well, that would be a lot, right? I mean, like that's tough for any actor because, you know, when you're surrounded by source material like that for so long, it becomes a part of your life. I mean, it's what you're thinking of consistently.
I guess when they hired all these kids, Bruce Campbell sat down with them and they're like, he's like, this is what you're getting yourself into. Are you sure you want to do it? Because like, he's like, we don't like to like cater and pamper. Like, you're going to be in the thick of it.
It's funny. I was listening today. This is a little off topic, but you've seen Blue Velvet, right?
Yeah.
So I'm listening to David Lynch's autobiography right now, and he was talking about when they were filming Blue Velvet. Obviously, that's a movie that tackles really heavy subject matter. There's a lot of really difficult stuff. So David, to keep the set lighter, would come to set every day on a pink bicycle with streamers. And he would ride around with peanut M&Ms in his pocket and just give them to the people on set to keep them in a better mood. Like, here's a peanut M&M. And it's like, I mean, when you're talking about like heavy subject matter like that, you got to do something to keep people in like a better spirit because you do want the authenticity of the emotion, but you don't want like someone to feel so overwhelmed by it that it's just miserable, right?
Yeah, but he had to kind of give them a talk and be like, this is what you're getting yourself into.
And the performances in it from top to bottom are all fantastic. That film has probably one of the most horrifying kills in the movie to me personally, which is the scene with the meat carver, which they hint at early in the film where they're cutting the ham. And I was like, oh God. And then that scene in the bathroom with the glass is gnarly.
The scene that like, even seeing it now, and I know it's coming, it still like shocks me is when she starts cutting her arm and then the lights go out and then the boyfriend, the brother walks in and she was like, it's okay. I think I stopped it. And you see her arm just like rips off.
Oh God. And then when she's cutting through her cheek. Oh God, that's like, that stuff's all disgusting to me, which we'll talk about when we talk about Evil Dead Rise. But as someone who has been tattooed multiple times recently, there's a moment in that movie that got me quite a bit. I won't lie. I was like, oh no. But no, this movie, truly some of the gnarliest kills, but it also has a really great emotional core. And I think if you're going to remake a movie, remake it like this. That you're going to appease fans.
And you know, between the unrated and the rated R version, there's not much different from both of them. There's like 5 minutes. There's like 5 minutes extra. And I would argue that even those 5 minutes feel like I'm glad they cut some of that stuff off for the theatrical cut. Like the ending, I'm glad they cut that out. I like how the theatrical cut ends better than the extended cut.
And I also too, I've seen people complain about it in the past, but like the raining blood at the end and that whole showdown sequence, I personally think the film earns it at that point. I think it stays very subdued and does a really good job slowly revealing things to where when it blows up like that at the end, I'm all for it. I think it's a blast.
Also, like the two things about that movie. One is that like, I like how the book has an actual like, it's not just killing people at random. It's actually performing a ritual.
Yes.
And the ritual involves collecting, I think it's 7 souls or 5 souls, I forget what it is.
Mhm.
And that will awaken the creature that we get at the end. So I really like that there's more of a purpose. It's not just killing at random, but it's like, oh, there's an actual like logic behind this book. The one thing that I will say that this is not a complaint, it's just more of it cracked me up throughout the movie. The best friend takes a beating left and right.
100%. Also, the another image that sticks out to me big time in this movie, not even like a horror, it's not even like a violent thing, but when they're burying Jane Levy outside and she's got the plastic bag over her head, there's something about that that's just so eerie to me. Like knowing that she's still kicking and like, is she gonna get out of there? Like,
Fun,
oh God.
fun fact, they really did bury her.
Really?
Yeah, they said that obviously she's not buried. They put like a little like thing to hold her
Yeah.
face from it. But like the only way they could get that shot was to actually Jane Levy's actually inside and they're actually throwing dirt on her.
I bet she was scared to death.
Yeah, she didn't love that doing that. But yeah, they did bury her.
No, that movie, it gets better every time I rewatch it too, because I really liked it when I saw it in the theater, but revisiting it a couple of times recently over the past few years, I like it even more.
Also, I love the set design. That forest is
Yes.
just so creepy.
Yeah, and it's gonna hold up. Like I made a list recently of like some of my favorite horror remakes, and this is definitely one of my favorites that's ever been done.
Yeah.
It's right up there with the Suspiria remake. It's just like one of the most thoughtful, well put together remakes that's ever been done.
Well, because they took what made the film good and they just expanded on that.
Exactly. But yeah, I don't have much more to say about 2013. I don't know about you, but I just think it's fantastic. So I think it's perfect to move on to, which Ray and I just saw this recently, obviously, because it hasn't been out very long, but Evil Dead Rise, which I don't know about you, Ray, but similar to what you said about 2013, I was a little hesitant about this movie at first because obviously Fede Alvarez wasn't returning. We did have Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi producing, which had me excited about it, but like I didn't know anything about Lee Cronin. I didn't know anything about, his history as a filmmaker or anything. And obviously, like there was some disputes with Warner Brothers at first, like as to whether or not they wanted to release this theatrically, which whenever you get that, it kind of like puts a little hesitance in you, like, is it going to work? This movie's fucking awesome.
Yeah,
it's really incredible. And I think Ray and I are both shocked that it's as good as it is, but it's really good.
Yeah, and it's a breeze. I didn't like honestly when the movie ended, I'm like, that's it? Like
I think it's like 96 minutes, and I felt like I blinked and it was over.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, and then again, going back to like Evil Dead 2013, this one also did a similar thing where there is an actual emotional weight to it.
And instead of drug addiction breaking people apart, it's broken family relationships, which I thought it was brilliant, introducing the idea that the mother's husband had just left. The family's going through the internal struggle of they don't have a dad anymore. It's creating a tension with them. Their apartment complex is about to go under. They're going to be evicted. They have to find a new place to live. Then you have the sister who's coming in. She's going through her own struggles. The mom is kind of upset because she wasn't there for her when she was going through those issues. And so there's like a really complex familial dynamic there that is a perfect allegory for possession, right? Like it really is. And that's what I like with these types of movies. You can take a concept that people have dealt with and struggled with and use this supernatural idea to just kind of elevate it to an extreme.
Yeah, well, what I really like about this movie is because at first some things felt random. Like I always hate it when there's a cutback or it's like 2 days earlier. You're like, well, I already know what's gonna happen, but this one doesn't do that. Like you get the opening scene, which by the way,
wonderful fake out. Loved it.
Well, it's probably one of my favorite title cards.
Yes, and also demons can quote Wuthering Heights. Which that whole scene, and also one of my favorite lines in there when he flies the drone past her and he's like, nah, if you just put it up to your face, it'll just cut you up a little bit. And then when the demon had it fly up in her own face and it was just cutting up her face.
Which, by the way, this is the first 5 minutes of the movie. We'll try to be a little spoiler free
Yes.
for this one because it just came out.
But I will say that one kill at the beginning, I won't even be able to pull that out of my mind for a very long time. Just that girl running down the pier. I was like, no, I don't want to look at this anymore. But no, it's a great intro.
It's a great intro. I love that scene when you see the title card.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get introduced to our protagonist, and she's going through some things of her own. So she goes to see her family.
The life of a roadie.
All this crap has happened.
Don't call me a roadie.
Also, I love that, like, the apartment complexes just feel so lived in.
It feels disgusting. Yeah. Like in a very dilapidated way. Even at the beginning, before everything happens, the elevator, you can just feel how hard it is to get up and down floors and just how slow the doors are opening and stuff. You can just feel the wear in it. I do want to say, though, props to the little girl in the movie, because when the earthquake happens, she still dives into that pizza box to grab a piece of that pizza. And I've got respect for her for that, because I would have done the same shit.
I was like, I almost died. I deserve a slice of pizza.
Well, all I was thinking is, I was like, the earthquake didn't ruin the pizza. The boxes are still intact. But no, I do want to say, though, the possession sequence in this with the mother, with the elevator, was very creative.
It was very creative. And I feel like, you know, as we try to become more sensitive to people's, you know, traumas, there are certain things you can't just show on screen like you did on the original Evil Dead. So, you know, on Evil Dead, the original Evil Dead, and I would argue even on 2013, there is a little bit of assault in those two. Well, one of them for sure.
The first one for
in
sure.
2013.
They do the vomiting in 2013 where she like throws up in her mouth, right? Like when she's tied up to the thing. Is that what that was? Or she just gets, I know she gets tied up to the tree, but I don't know if something like, I thought something puked in her mouth, but it's been a while.
She pukes something out and it crawls up her leg.
That's what it is. Okay. So it's a little less than the original.
Yeah, but this one you can tell it was done in a more tasteful way. Like
they just cut away.
Yeah, they just cut away because you don't, you know, like I get that some art that it's, you know, you don't want to censor art, but you do want to be mindful that there's people watching this with trauma. And you don't want to, you want people to still have fun with these movies and not be triggered by something horrible.
And I think that was enough to imply what we talked about when we talked about the original Evil Dead, which is that idea of your own autonomy being stripped away by this entity. Like I think her being strapped up with those like wires and stuff and just cutting away, you know. Like you know that. Yeah.
Although I will admit, when they find the records and they're spinning the records, the first thing I thought of is like, who pressed these?
Yeah, seriously. What was this, a Waxwork limited release? How long's Waxwork been in the game? And like I was trying to look at the writing on the center of the I think I just said 1, 2, and 3. And I'm like, oh, they were volume.
Yeah. Which, by the way, that's just I know you got it, but if you pay attention at the Waxwork mock-up design, the center sticker looks like those, like with the same writing and everything.
And also the Lilo and Stitch scene that I was talking. Put the finger on there, and then and also I want to say, we talk all the time about these movies, like just how great the horror elements are. When she's sitting in there with the headphones on and you see the mom crawl in through the back, I was like, this is just great filmmaking, because it's not a jump scare, but you as the audience know what's happening, but she doesn't know what's going on. And I'm like, turn around. There's so many moments like that are good. And I want to say too, these movies, and one of the things we didn't really talk about is I think every single one of these movies has had great casting. Like we talk about Bruce Campbell, but all the people that Bruce Campbell were surrounded by in the original films were great. They all accompanied him really well. They were all great actors. This movie had a great cast. The kids were all fantastic. I was really impressed. The sister was great. The actress who played the mother gave one of my favorite Deadite performances, period.
Oh, for sure. Something so eerie about her walking around. And I know we've talked about like kind of some of the inspiration behind that, but like, you know, like she obviously hurt her legs when she was dangling in the elevator. So you see her walking like she's dangling, like
Mhm.
her body is obviously damaged.
Mommy's with the maggots now. That's also that scene with the tub and the hot water, like, really made me uncomfortable. Something about that whole sequence, I was just like, "Oh god," like, something about the hot water just, like, searing on the skin, and then every time they got near the burner, I was like, "Oh, no, something's gonna happen." When she was cracking all
Um,
the eggs in the pan, I was like, "Oh my god," and then the scene where the one daughter has the cut, I was like, "Is she gonna try to sear that
oh,
shut?" I was like, "No," but yeah, there's a lot of really great tension in this movie. And one of the things, like, we didn't really talk about it much, but obviously, the first two Evil Dead's Cabin in the Woods, Evil Dead 2013, Cabin in the Woods, Evil Dead Rise, apartment complex in Los Angeles. Not what you would have expected, but the setup with the elevator and being locked in this place, there's something horrifying about, yeah, you're in your apartment complex, but you're on the 15th floor. You can't just jump down.
yeah, you're kind of stuck there. Also, I do at first when you have the earthquake, I was like, what? Like what's and then they show you why the earthquake, and I'm like, oh, okay, like that makes sense. And then you see the license plate that it's a California license plate. I'm like, oh, okay, so all of this makes perfect sense. I do, and something that I really liked about this one too is that because as someone who lived in California, you deal with earthquakes all the
Mhm.
time. So like some of the stuff were pretty accurate. Like when she yells at them, it's like, you don't use the elevator after a quake. It's like it's almost like, if you're there, and if you've ever lived through an earthquake, So it's like the kids are not dumb. They know exactly what they're supposed to do. So I really like that they actually took their time to show those things too.
But then
That it
she
was
went and did it herself. She took that box down the elevator, god damn it. She
I
didn't
know, I was
listen
like,
to her own advice.
what a hypocrite.
Oh, also, amazing nod to The Shining in this movie.
Yeah, nod.
Yeah, maybe shot for shot remake. I was thrilled with it, honestly. Like, it made me smile. Sometimes when filmmakers do that, I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever. But this, it was charming.
No, it was, and there was some stuff about this movie that you can tell that there was like some heavy inspiration from other material.
The
Also, like
Thing, 100%. I was literally screaming it in my seat at the end. Like, there's no way. There's a scene in the third act. We won't go into detail, but there is no way that was not inspired by Carpenter's The Thing.
oh yeah,
100%.
which I still love that every creature they try. That's something I love too. That the Deadites almost like look different on every movie.
Mm-hmm. And
Um,
there's some spine-chilling scenes with them in it that don't even have to do with violence. Like the chant sequence we were talking about is horrifying.
it's oh my, this movie was so good. I think if no, there's nothing I really would change about this movie.
No, and that's exactly what I was saying. I read a lot of more like middle of the road reviews that were like not enough characterization, and I'm thinking, did you watch the originals? There's no characterization in the first one. It's just dumb teenagers. And then the second movie, you're building off Bruce Campbell, but like this sets up the family dynamic without being hokey. It doesn't feel poorly written. It's not just exposition dump after exposition dump. It feels very natural. I love that the chemistry between the siblings felt so natural, the way they played together and were kind of poking at each other. Like it just felt very real. And I think that all the Evil Dead movies have done a really great job, especially 2013 and Rise, building on those dynamics really well.
The other thing that I loved about this movie, how creative they got with some of that cinematography.
100%. It felt very reminiscent of Raimi. It really did. Just like the canted angles where it's sort of tilted a little bit, the way things moved through hallways, like it felt like an Evil
The
Dead
wa
movie.
the water tub scene where it's like you get
Mm-hmm.
half of the water. My favorite scene though is probably the peephole scene.
Yes, it's amazing.
Because on the trailer, you only get that scene of her looking at the people, but there is a whole sequence that happens through the people, and it's incredible.
And also the fact that it's through the youngest daughter's perspective, which
Also,
makes it more horrifying.
there was a scene that reminded me specifically of you, Nate.
Hmm.
When those kids knock on her door and it's like, "You want to come watch the Friday the
Nightmare.
13th?"
It was Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh yeah,
And the
Nightmare on
kid-
Elm Street.
And the kid was like, even the bad ones. And the older brother's like, there are no bad ones. Yeah, it made my day. I was like, they're dead. Those kids are dead. No, but I think like if you haven't seen it yet, there's a lot of things in it that are going to take you by surprise, because like even me, I went into it like, okay, they're going to take it this way, they're going to do this, and honestly, they did a lot of stuff that I didn't think they would do, which is surprising for me and Ray, because we watch a lot of horror movies, and I think
it's surprising for an Evil Dead movie.
Mm-hmm. And it's happy to know Ray and I were reading about it before we started the podcast, but this movie made a couple $1 million over its budget the first weekend, which means it's going to be in the theater for several more weekends. It'll probably end up grossing 40 to 50 million, which is going to be plenty of enough money to get us another one, which is all I want. I want another one.
Well, Nate, as much as I would love to keep talking about this, when I worry we're going to start entering spoilers.
Yeah, there's really not a lot of ways to talk about really intricate details without spoiling it, but just go watch it. Like, support these filmmakers. This is clearly a passion project of people who actually give a shit about the Evil Dead franchise.
Well,
like,
and the reason why it's so important to support these movies is because, you know, we just quickly touch base on that, but the reason why Ash vs. Evil Dead didn't keep going is because no one actually supported it.
Mm-hmm.
So they canceled it. So let's not make that mistake again.
No, and I love, like, you know, people call it the horror renaissance, but we're having a lot of really amazing, unique franchises. But there's also franchises like, I can't believe Scream 6 made the amount of money it did. And guess what? It was so much fun, paid homage to the original in a way that was a blast. Like, I want more of these movies. So when they're good, go support them so we can get more. Yeah. Especially Evil Dead, which is a franchise that's very near and dear to both Ray and I. I would love to see a lot more movies in this universe. And they kind of leave it at a spot at the end where we could go and get some more material, which I'm excited about. And they also hint at some things about the Necronomicon that sort of open up the universe a little bit more to make me think that Lee Cronin was already like, yeah, I got some ideas for this.
Nice. I hope we do. So
there's not a bad movie in this franchise, by the way. I don't know if we said that, but there's not a single bad movie in this franchise.
Yeah, which says a lot, because I feel like all the franchises usually have some duds.
Yeah, like one or two, like even Scream, which I think is a super consistent franchise. The third movie is a little bit of a dud. It has some problems. I still enjoy watching it, but like this is a movie with 5 consistent films in the franchise, which is pretty impressive.
And 3 seasons that were pitch perfect.
Mm-hmm. So, Ray, we typically do this when we talk about directors. We've never really done a series of films. Do you want to rank them for the people out there with where they're sitting now? It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult for me.
Yeah, no, it's going to be super difficult.
So sure. Let's give the people out there. Go ahead and start. What would be the bottom tier? What's the last film in the Evil Dead franchise for you?
I'm about to break your heart, but it's the OG.
The original Evil Dead? No, I know a lot of people that feel like the original Evil Dead is bottom of the list. It's obviously it's a boundary pusher for the time period it was made. It's a little rough around the edges, but like this franchise wouldn't exist without it. But I know you still love it. Like I know it's hard because all these movies are great.
Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to stress is like these are this is a perfect franchise in the sense that I love all of the movies.
Mm-hmm.
So
100%.
But one has to be at the bottom if we're doing a ranking, and for me, it's the original Evil Dead.
Well, for me, no surprise to anybody, it's Army of Darkness. I love this movie. I think it's fun and it's campy and it's silly, but like it's just too tonally inconsistent with me. It feels the most bloated of the franchise. It's probably the one I revisit the least, but I still think it's a good movie. And I don't have as much nostalgia for it as you do because I watched it later than I did the other movies. Mm-hmm. And I think like I've seen Evil Dead 1 and 2 probably like 25 times. I may have seen Army of Darkness 5 times, maybe. Okay. So I definitely haven't revisited it enough, but one had to be on the bottom. It's Army of Darkness for me. So what do you got for number 4?
So number 4 for me is Army of Darkness.
Yeah.
And so here's the thing. Here's the weird thing about Army of Darkness. Army of Darkness is one that I revisit often. I actually probably watch Army of Darkness more often than any of the other movies in the list, because of the nostalgia value. But if I were to become objective as far as better movie, the other ones are better movies, technically speaking. I just really love Army of Darkness. I just think it's a really fun watch. It's one of those movies that I can just put on, any moment in time, and I'm gonna enjoy it. I've been watching it since I was a little kid. It's one of the first movies that introduced me to horror.
Mhm.
As an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
So I love this movie, and I do watch this movie a ton, and I quote it a ton. But if I were to be objective about as filmmaking quality, the other ones beat it out. Which Army of Darkness would be number 2 for me.
Nice. Well, this one might be a little controversial, but number 4 for me is the 2013 Evil Dead. And that's not to say that I don't love this movie, but that's where things start getting very difficult for me. I love Fede Alvarez's take on this. It has a much darker tone, and it's incredibly violent, which I really like. But there's something about the 3 other movies that just edge it out like an inch. And when I'm talking like an inch, like just on revisiting this film, it could go up higher for me in like a second, like without a doubt.
Right.
It's so hard for me to even set them up. But right now, when I'm thinking about them in my mind and I'm like, where would this fall? It would be in 4th place for me. So what's number 3? Yes.
This is where it gets extremely hard for me too. Because it's so hard because I want to say Rise because I just saw Rise, so I haven't spent enough time with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was going to change. Gosh, this is so hard. I'm gonna give it to Evil Dead Rise just because I've only seen it once.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's hard. And honestly, I'll just piggyback off you. For me, my number 3 is Evil Dead Rise. And the reason why it peaks over top of 2013 for me right now is solely because I just watched it and it's really fresh in my mind. But the things I love about Rise are the same things I love about 2013. The deep character writing. I think that it's so great. And it also has great tension. It's so well built up. But yeah, it would be in 3rd place for me as well right now. It's so hard when you have a franchise that's this damn consistent.
Yeah, and for me, it's like the same thing. It's because I just saw it. I can guarantee you this movie will move up very quickly once I have it on Blu-ray and I can rewatch it.
I completely agree. And like I said, I mean, these things can shift.
I can guarantee that movie's going to rise on my list.
100%. And can you imagine when we get 2 or 3 more of these? It's going to be even harder. So what's number 2 for you? Since we both have Evil Dead Rise. 2013?
2013.
And the thing is, like, number 2 for me is the original Evil Dead. And the reason why, like, it's funny. If I watch the original Evil Dead and 2013 back to back, I like the characterization of 2013 better. I love the characters. I love the buildup of it. But there's something about the original Evil Dead for me, the foundation for the entire franchise, the creativity behind like the limitations that they had to film, like what we were talking about with like putting the log through the tree and that. There's so much charm to how the movie came about and was created. And it also has a really nostalgic place in my heart because it's one of the films that made me fall in love with horror movies. So that's why, like, to me, 2013 I've had less time with. I think there are things about it that are better than the original Evil Dead, like 100%. But that's why Evil Dead is number 2. And we already know what our number 1 is, Ray.
Dead by Dawn.
There's no way that this movie will ever be pushed out of that spot for me because it is probably my favorite horror movie of all time.
It's a perfect movie. I think it does really well at blending horror and comedy. I think it does such a good job at being legitimately off-putting and uncomfortable, but also so much fun and such a blast. I don't know, it's hard to describe because there are moments in that movie that you feel really uncomfortable, and there are moments in that movie where you're just having the time of your life.
Evil Dead 2 is a perfect movie in my opinion. There's not a single thing I would say negative about it. Someday, Ray, we need to get together in person and watch that movie together because I think we would have a blast watching that movie together.
Yes, we would.
So that's our discussion that's our discussion on Evil Dead. I mean, it's like, I love doing this, Ray, and I hope we can do this with more horror franchises because I love horror movies so much, and so it's fun to talk about. This will give me an excuse to force you to watch all these horror franchises that I love so that we can talk about them. Like, there's something about the horror community that's just so amazing, and like Evil Dead something that's very near and dear to both of our hearts. And so it was fun to do this episode kind of just on a whim and just like say, hey, the new movie's out. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, and maybe we won't guarantee what the topic of next week is because
it can always
working
shift.
some stuff out with the director.
Yeah.
And so we will keep you all on your toes, but
no, we will talk
Hail to the
about
king,
internet.
baby.
We'll talk about international films at some point. At some point, we'll talk about that. At some point, we'll
Yep.
talk about different things.
I mean, if we were to split hairs, I wasn't born in this country, so all these movies are international to me.
Whoa, that's hey, you found a workaround with it. All right, so that was our discussion of Evil Dead. As always, you can follow us over at the Film Monsters Podcast for updates on the new episodes when they come out, or whatever beautiful logo we get for this Evil Dead episode, which I'm very excited to see what it looks like when your brother works on this one. But yeah, follow Ray at Analog C for all these new Record Store Day releases that if you're watching the video episode, you could see in the background. And then you can follow me at My Exit Unfair for whenever I get new records in. I'm waiting on a ton of stuff right now and I'm bummed out about it. But yeah, stay tuned for the next episode. We don't know what the topic's going to be yet because Ray and I's lives continue to change over and over again. But we appreciate you listening to today's episode, and hail to the king, baby.
Ruby.
Bye.